Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're digging into the Indian Revolt of 1857. Now, this was a violent, massive uprising against British rule, and even though it was ultimately crushed, its failure somehow ended up changing the entire destiny of a nation.
So the real question here isn't just what happened, but how. How does a single failed rebellion become the turning point that basically leads to the India we know today? It's a fascinating story.
To really get the scale of the impact, you just have to look at this shift. Before 1857, India was, for all intents and purposes, run by a private company that was all about profit. But after, it was ruled directly by the British Crown. A commercial trading zone became the jewel in the crown of a formal empire. That is a huge change.
Okay, so the shock of the revolt sent massive waves through the British establishment, and their response wasn't just to put down the rebellion. They systematically tore down the old system and imposed a brand new, much tighter grip on power.
The first step was swift, legal, and absolute. With the Government of India Act of 1858, they officially ended over 250 years of the East India Company's rule. Just like that, with the stroke of a pen, a massive commercial enterprise was gone, replaced by a full-blown imperial government.
And this new structure? It was a complete top-down overhaul. Power now flowed straight from the crown to a new cabinet minister in London, the Secretary of State for India, and then down to his representative in India, the Viceroy. And here's the key change. All the big decisions were now being made in London, not Calcutta.
And the man they picked for the job, the very first Viceroy, was Lord Canning. He'd been the Governor-General right in the middle of all the chaos, and now it was his job to manage this incredible transition from a corporate asset to a formal piece of the British Empire. Now, the British also totally re-engineered the army to make sure another uprising could never happen. Before the revolt, you see, Indian soldiers, or sepoys, vastly outnumbered the Europeans. Well, afterwards, that ratio was dramatically changed to guarantee British military dominance at all times. And this overhaul was incredibly strategic. The most crucial weapons, like artillery, were put exclusively in European hands, and their recruitment strategy became pure divide and rule. They started favoring communities that had stayed loyal, like Sikhs and Gurkhas, while deliberately sidelining soldiers from the areas where the revolt had been strongest. The whole goal was to create an army that was intentionally fragmented along ethnic and regional lines.
But these changes weren't just about politics or the military. The aftermath of 1857 cut deep, profoundly reshaping Indian society, the economy, and the entire relationship between the British rulers and the people they ruled.
This created a really strange paradox in British policy. On the one hand, they learned a very harsh lesson and became way more cautious about interfering with local religions and customs, but on the other hand, a deep sense of mistrust and racial superiority really hardened, creating a much more segregated and distrustful society. Which, of course, brings us to a critical question. What happened to the men and women who actually led this massive rebellion against what was then the most powerful empire on Earth? Well, as you can imagine, their fates were as varied as they were tragic.
Let's start with the warrior queen, Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi, probably the most celebrated and iconic symbol of the resistance.
She was a fierce commander, absolutely refused to surrender, and was ultimately killed in battle, which of course cemented her status as a national hero and a legend.
Then you have Tantia Tope. He was a brilliant guerrilla commander who kept the fight going long after the main revolt had collapsed.
His resistance was incredibly tenacious, but he was eventually betrayed, captured, and then executed by the British in 1859.
And what about the symbolic leader of the revolt? That was Bahadur Shah Zafar, the very last emperor of the once mighty Mughal dynasty. He was an elderly poet who, frankly, never even wanted the role.
After the British retook Delhi, he was put on trial and exiled to Rangoon, in modern-day Myanmar. His lonely death there marked the sad, definitive end of the entire Mughal line. And as you can see from the fates of the other leaders, the suppression was just brutal. Some, like Begum Hazrat Mahal, managed to escape into exile in Nepal. The fate of Nana Saheb, another key leader, remains a mystery to this day. But many others, like Kunwar Singh and Khan Bahadur Khan, either died of their battle wounds or were captured and executed.
But, and this is the great irony of the whole story, while the British were cementing their power and wiping out the rebellion's leadership, they had, completely unintentionally, sown the seeds of their own departure. This brings us to the revolt's most powerful and frankly unexpected legacy.
How in the world did a crushing military defeat become the origin story for a future nation? Really, this quote says it all. The shared experience of the uprising and the shared trauma of its suppression created a new, maybe fragile, but very real sense of unity across a vast and incredibly diverse subcontinent. You have to remember, before 1857, people's identities were mainly local or regional. This revolt, for all its chaos and disorganization, showed for the first time that people from different kingdoms, different religions, and different backgrounds could actually find a common cause against a single foreign power. And this is where the power of narrative, of storytelling, comes into play. Decades later, a whole new generation of Indian nationalist leaders took this event and completely reframed it. They transformed the memory of a failed mutiny into the heroic story of the First War of Independence. It became a foundational myth for a new India.
So, what's the ultimate takeaway here? The events of 1857 were so much more than just a military defeat. In its failure, it gave birth to a powerful new idea, the idea of India itself. The uprising was crushed, yes, but it lit a fire of national consciousness that would, 90 years later, finally burn the empire down.